Well, welcome to the JD Power Travel Podcast. This is the June edition. As always, the travel podcast is composed of the folks who run the travel studies at JD Power. That includes Andrea Stokes, who is the practice lead for hospitality. Hello, Andrea.
Hello.
And Jenny Corwin, who's our director of customer insights. Hello, Jenny.
Hello.
Well, I thought we'd start off with a topic that certainly seems to be getting a lot of headlines across all of our industries, that being the hospitality, rental car, airport, and airlines, which is the shortage of employees and the impact on satisfaction. So, Andrea, what is the effect of the shortage, if there is such a shortage, of employees on the hospitality industry?
Yes, well, we touched on this, I think, when we spoke back in May. There's definitely a big disconnect, right, between the increasing demand and hospitality and even other parts of the travel industry trying to keep up with hiring and hiring, not only hiring people back that might have been let go several months ago or at the start of the pandemic, but hiring new employees to come into the travel industry and the hospitality industry. So there have been, some stories that hotels have had to take rooms offline because they do not have enough housekeeping staff to keep up with all of the rooms, all of the available rooms. Um, and that of course reduces the supply that's out there for this rapidly increasing demand that we're seeing. So it's a story in hospitality, but I know airlines and other parts of the industry are being affected by this labor shortage.
Yeah, and for my side of the business, the big story is American Airlines not being able to put as many planes in the air as they'd like to, simply because they have a labor shortage as well. Mostly it's really the technical issue, as far as I can read it, is the ground staff that has to meet FAA safety requirements. And then there's also a bottleneck for retraining airplane pilots who they furloughed, anywhere from 6 to 18 months ago. So they can't just hop back in an aircraft. They kind of need to, get acclimated to all the safety procedures again. Although it's probably like probably like riding a bike. You don't really fall off the bike once you learn how to ride it. But hey, it's you got to be a little bit on the safe side. So that is the biggest problem at the moment in the airline industry is American Airlines, and they did trim back about 1% of their so far 1% of their whole traffic, all their traffic volume across their system, just to make sure that they have enough crews to meet demand. And Jenny, are you seeing anything on your side of the business?
I mean, we haven't been able to see it in the data yet because what we're seeing is companies making safe decisions, right? So brands that are not opening, cutting corners with cleaning. Instead, they're choosing, not to sell those rooms or not trying to. Obviously, with canceled flights, we're not getting satisfaction around that. Of course, you're unhappy, but we're only measuring satisfaction when you actually have a flight. So right now, right, we're seeing most industries making pretty safe decisions. I think we'll see what happens as this continues, and depending on how long it continues, I think then we would definitely see larger impacts on satisfaction.
Yeah, and on the airport side of things, obviously, it is also affecting the number of outlets that are open. So people's passenger priorities shifted. As we've mentioned on this podcast before, we track an awful lot of airport customers using our passenger view product, which is a very short cell phone surveys that are taken on airport. And their priorities have shifted from getting coffee to getting a meal now. And that's a very big difference in the number of personnel that the airport and the providers have to have on hand. Staffing a coffee shop is, a handful of people at any one particular shift, and a restaurant is more than a handful of people. So anyway, so we're going to revisit, what the effect of all this demand, increased demand or surprise demand has had on the industries as we close out this podcast. But our next topic I thought was very interesting. And Andrea, you had mentioned to us that Marriott is not requiring some employees or any employees to be vaccinated anymore. So what is the story there?
Yes, that is recent news. Marriott actually was one of the first companies to come out and allow their employees time off to get the vaccine. Um, and so that's great, but they are not, necessarily requiring employees, hotel employees, to be vaccinated to do their jobs. I know there have been several stories about this question across other companies. And do companies have a right to ask employees or require employees to get the vaccine? I think the consensus is that companies do or can require this, but Marriott is not going to require it. Also, recently AHLA did revise its mask guidance for hotel employees, and as more and more Americans get vaccinated, AHLA came out and said that it's it's not necessarily a requirement that vaccinated employees have to wear masks. So they're kind of following what the CDC has said on that issue.
Yeah, and some of the service places I've gone to here in Connecticut are still requiring their employees to wear masks, but dropping the requirement for customers to wear masks. So, which I think is a kind of an interesting kind of twist, or at least a halfway point. I was asking some folks today in the store that I was in, when is the corporation going to let you get rid of the masks? And they said, not soon enough. So, anyway, one of the topics that Jenny had brought up earlier this week was some of the charges that certain airlines are invoking for their passengers to cover the costs of what they call the costs of COVID. So, Jenny, what's the story there?
Sure. Yeah, we saw an article earlier this week that Frontier Airlines is going to start adding a COVID-19 surcharge to their tickets. So it's a COVID recovery fee, and it's supposed to offset the costs of implementing all of the COVID-19 measurements, such as the increased sanitation and cleaning on the aircraft and ticket counters, all of those things. So it's interesting because we haven't seen anybody doing this specifically yet, and the airline industry has a lot of transparency around their ticket fees, right? So it's going to immediately become visible to those passengers that they're paying this fee. Now, it looks like it's actually going to be just a percentage of a carrier interface charge, which is something that already existed, right? And they're just kind of taking a percentage of it. But I think it's interesting. I don't know that it's odd that they did this now and not last year when they had to start implementing these procedures, and I think that's probably why it's a little bit newsworthy, because it seems a little late to the game. Although I know that a lot of travel industry brands are working to really make up those additional costs and the lack of travelers over the last year. So I don't think it's going to be completely unique, but it is something that stood out this week specifically.
Yeah, and what we've seen in the airline industry during this pandemic recovery is, as you recall, airlines have waived all fees, all change fees for all ticket types, simply trying to convince people to actually book a trip and increase their cash flow. And as we've come through this recovery, some airlines are letting those fees creep back in, especially around what they call basic economy seats. And in all of our JD Power data, every single airline study that we've done since the inception of it, it's the value of the ticket and the cost and fees incurred while flying or while changing your itinerary have the greatest effect on satisfaction. So it's a question of, we need revenue. If we're an airline that's struggling, that's understandable. They need cash flow, but this will come at a cost of satisfaction. So, thanks, Jenny. We thought we'd end up here with just basically the general topic of where are we now in recovery, And so, Andrea, where are we now in the hospitality industry? What is the macro view of what's happening during this recovery period?
Well, occupancy is slowly creeping up. I think it kind of, for a time in the month of May, leveled out a little bit and into June. But as the summer kind of goes on here, I do expect we'll get a couple of extra points increase in hotel occupancy, which again, that's going along with the demand, the increasing demand. So it's good news, for the industry. I think some hotels and some properties in urban locations or downtown locations, properties near convention centers, they are much slower to recover. So that is continuing, and that is, strictly due to still the lack of meetings and events and business travel in general, transient business travel. So, as we said, leisure demand is driving everything right now. We'll see how business travel does in the fall, which is traditionally a much bigger season for business travel and even meetings and events as well. Fingers crossed that we'll start seeing that business travel come back in the fall. I know, a lot of companies may still not even be bringing back employees to the office yet at this time. Some companies are, maybe perhaps we're going to do this, in June or July, but they're now putting this off for another few months.
Yeah,
So,
and just to follow
mhm.
on those business thing, we that was one of the topics, special topics we've done in our passenger review product across a bunch of airports across the United States, asking people what the outlook for business travel was for them. And the major finding that we found this past week is that it's not the policies anymore that are preventing people from traveling. 90, 85, 95% of business travelers are saying their current policy is go ahead and travel. But it's really that they don't have a reason to travel, that other people haven't opened their offices, and if your customer's office isn't open, there's no reason to go see them. As one airline put it to me, well, you can fly out here if you would like, but you'll be sitting in your hotel room using Zoom because we're not opening our office yet. So that's what we found in ours. And Jenny, do you have any insights on this? We'll give you the last word.
On business travel specifically, I don't have anything, but it looks like leisure travel is looking
No,
up.
just or on pre-pandemic recovery. What's
Sure, yeah.
the macro
So
view?
we've got the AAA forecast that came out for Fourth of July holiday travel, and it looks very promising. It's really close to 2019 actual numbers, right? We're about 1.1 million travelers shy, but when you're talking about 48, 47 million people, it's getting better, right? So they are expecting a lot of travel. To kind of loop back around to where we were previously when we started this podcast, a lot of that travel is going to be by car, right? So, and we expect a significant proportion of that to hopefully be by rental car too. So, this is where we're starting to see that increased demand, which is really great, super positive. But we're just hoping the industry can keep up now that the travelers are coming back.
Yeah, and although it might be stressful, I think this is a problem you want to have at this point, which is, surprising demand. So, well,
Absolutely.
sorry, what was that, Jen?
Absolutely. We're getting into that revenge travel we were talking
That's
about
right.
before very much.
That's a great term I learned from you, revenge travel. I use that quite a bit, so I've stolen that from you. So.
Okay.
Well, thanks everyone for attending our latest podcast. I'm Michael Taylor. I'm the practice lead for travel at JD Power, and been joined as always by Andrea Stokes, practice lead for hospitality, and Jenny Corwin, who is our director of our consumer insights. So, if you'd like to learn more about what we do here at JD Power, you can go to jdpower.com, click on business, and that'll take you into the wonderful website that we have created. And Kelly Shea, who's one of our producers, has a big hand in creating our content on the web. And you can see all the different kinds of studies and conclusions and white papers that we have on travel. So once again, thank you very much, and we'll see you next month.